Good morning. So, just as Jim described, we have what Mets and analysts start to term the fall unpredictability barrier, right,
Morning,
Jim?
Cheryl.
Um, Morning. Seasonal transitions, still getting storms, convective storms, bands, body storms. All of this is really hard to interpret, especially from a view like ours, where you're looking at big areas, and actually, it's even going to be hard to interpret from any of you that have like fire danger rating areas, and you have larger areas with multiple stations in them. So what I want to do this morning is kind of break some of that down and talk about some of the patterns that are going through and some of the ways that we can look at things to try and help you use the tools that you have with GLFF and with FIMS to kind of look at what might be signs of fire activity. So let me share. Okay, is that showing up, FIMS?
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about is this cold front moving through. I think this, for the eastern area in general, is probably the biggest and most widespread cold front that we've had move through. So this is the minimum temperatures. This is this morning. So the daily summary for October 7th for today is all going to be forecast. So this is, since it's from midnight to midnight, we won't get an observed until midnight tonight. So looking at the forecast, this is what our forecasted morning lows were. And you can see, getting down into the freezing temperatures in these purple areas. So up there in Minnesota and some of Wisconsin. We go to tomorrow morning, you see more of that, and you start to see this move to the east. You see those purple diamonds in Michigan. Now you're starting to see them over in New York and in New England. And we just watch this kind of move across. The other thing that we need to pay attention to is how long this stays in effect. We're starting to see more of the purple, some of the into the 20s, these types of things. So just keep in mind this is pretty widespread across the eastern area, and these kinds of temperatures at night, if we have not had trees turning yet, which I know I haven't had everything turn here in northwest Wisconsin, they will start to turn with this kind of an event going through, this kind of a front keeping temperatures, the lows this low. I don't think we've seen this at all this year. New England, it seems to hang on the most, even into the mid-Atlantic, and on the coast, you're starting to see those lower temperatures. So I think that this one cold front moving through, being so widespread, will be our major transition one for areas that maybe have not been quite transitioning into fall yet because of the warmer temperatures that we've had. And Jim, do you have anything more to say about that?
No, Cheryl, you're capturing it well. That's something I forgot to add. So thanks for picking me up on that. That looks really good. It is going to be quite cold behind this, especially in the Northeast.
Yeah, and even till Saturday, we've got that cold front hanging in there. We see it on Sunday. And even into Monday of next week. I mean, it's pretty far out, but just the fact that we're having those kinds of lows, this is a big event. The other thing that I want to show you with why I have this up. Let's see. So I'm gonna go and talk about more specific things with the charts, but with this wind, with the wind barbs on this chart, this is what I'm talking about with needing to kind of dive into individual stations, because as you can see, there's different wind directions going on. And the thing that goes on with wind directions in the east that we have to, watch for as well is the different patterns of RH. So typically, if we're getting northerly northwest winds, they're very dry. If we get the southern winds, especially anything coming off the Atlantic, then we tend to have higher RHs. So paying attention not only to the speed of the winds, but also kind of the wind directions. And then if you're looking at any kind of wind indices, then you probably should look at stations individually, and I'll show you some of this in just a second, but it's because you could start to get some of these different wind directions and different things going on at different stations that seem like they would be the same, but if we have a lot of isolated like convective storms going through or bands or different patterns and not just a really strong frontal pattern, then those wind directions and wind speeds could be very different even between stations that are fairly close together. So to look at a few more things, so this is October 5th. This is in the LP of Michigan. There was a 85-acre fire on October 5th that happened in this area. We have Leota right here. I have the fine fuel moisture code up, and so that's more the surface fuels in the Canadian system, similar to kind of 10-hour, and it was in the 90s in this entire area. So that is a fire day. So this is another transition where I know we've been focusing on drought a lot. It definitely plays into kind of where we're at with our live fuels and how quickly things dry out. But we have to look at a wide array of indices to kind of get at what our problems might be. So even looking at switching back to the fine fuel moisture code is giving us an idea of that, this was a fire day. The ISI, which includes the FFMC and wind, was above 10 in this area. That's also something that indicates that you're likely to have spread. If you look up higher, we had a 17, 12, 15, 13. Not as bad over here. But these are the types of things to just start kind of getting in your head as we transition more into a surface spread system as opposed to that live system that's starting to go dormant. These are the charts. So just here's BUI at that same station, Leota. One of the things that we need to look at in all of these charts, and the same thing is going on with NFDRS with FEMS, is this kind of rebounding. So we'll get storms that come through, we'll drop down, and we'll rebound. We'll get storms that come through, drop down, and rebound. So one of the things to pay attention to on things like BUI and ERC are we rebounding back to the point that we were rebounding before? So this means that the system has a lot of buildup in it because a storm comes in and it rebounds back practically to the same point that it was at. That's something that we need to watch. We're hoping that those rebounds get less and less. That means that we're getting out of conditions But right now in this area, it's pretty much maintaining that. The other thing to look at is just the slope of the line. If that slope is really steep, then that means the rebound is really quick. And that's another indication of that could be a fire day, is if that line, whether it be a forecast or observed, is pretty steep, then pay attention to those signs. We can look at similar things in FEM. So this is Nolhagen up in Vermont near New Hampshire, that border right there. Same thing going on with this rebounding. We get the storms in, we rebound, we get some storms in, we rebound. There's the big storm that came in, put quite a bit of rain, but look at the rebound.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
So that's
I
where
have
we
top of
see
the
fire
hour, no matter
activity
what time zone you're
still
in.
occurring.
So
And
we will
then
get
the
started
forecast
with
has it
the
holding steady.
weekly GAC weather
One
call.
thing I want to mention
And
about the
I'll
FEMS
turn it over
forecast,
to
there
Jim
is
Woolman
an
for
issue
weather
whenever
update.
there's precipitation in the
All right,
forecast,
thanks, Jen.
then it
Let me
is
go ahead
kind
and
of
share my
overdoing it.
screen.
So be a little cautious about some of
Oops.
these drops if
Wrong
there's
window.
precipitation in your forecast, because it may not drop that much. ERC doesn't look
All right, I think
horrible at Nolhagen, considering how dry it
All right.
has been. So
to
looking
get
at
started
wind
here,
indices like
kind of look at the
burning
last 7
index
days
and
of
spread
rainfall.
component
Kind of cuts off northern
in
Minnesota
individual
there in the upper
areas are
left, trying to
good.
show, like, kind of get zoomed in images of these.
You know, over the
Uh,
weekend there was quite a bit
And
of
this was as of
activity,
2 this
so
morning.
this
So
would have
there's a little
been
bit
over
of
the
rain that
weekend.
fell
But
in the lower
here's that
peninsula this
really
morning that isn't captured here, and also a little bit more along the
steep
Ohio Valley.
slope that I was talking
But
about.
overall, like this
And
rainfall
then
along the
it
front that's
peaked
come
up
in,
above
it's
the
kind of
90th
coming in
percentile.
bands.
So that's,
So you get areas of
burning
moderate to heavy
index
rain,
is a
like you got through
combination of
portions
your
of central
spread
Michigan, but
component
just
and your
north of there toward
ERC.
like Mount
So
Pleasant, you got
you're
very little
getting those
rain.
together. You have the
And
wind
that's
in
also
there,
kind of be
and
maybe through
this will be
portions of
giving
lower,
you a good
as you get
idea
down
of
to the
kind
Ohio
of
Indiana
what to
border,
look for.
relatively drier today,
But
and the next
you have to
band
be
is
very
forming there now.
careful with burning
But
index
much of
and
Minnesota was
combining
dry. Up, you
stations
can't see it all the way
together,
up in northwest
because
Minnesota. They did
one
get
station
some
could
rain,
have
but it wasn't as widespread
it
as
could
they're
either
expecting. And then the
not
lower
pick up
right, if you
wind
look toward
very
the northeast and
well,
mid-Atlantic,
or
I mean, just nothing for
it's
the
not
last
getting
7
that
days.
same pattern.
So just kind of
And
keeping that in mind.
so
And then just kind of
if
looking
you
at the longer
average
term.
everything
So this is
together,
the
then
last
you may
30
not
days.
see the signs of what's
And
actually
we can see
going
where we got
on.
those areas of like heavy rain at the end of last month down, along the Ohio River, and then
Show you one
portions
that
of
this
like
is
around
down in
Albany,
Maryland.
northeastern
There's been some
Catskills, and
fires
portions of
down in
southern
this
Maine,
area
where we did
this
okay
Antietam
last month,
station.
but the longer term
ERC
dryness
doesn't look
trend
that bad, but
is still
here
there.
we have that
And I'll
trending
show that there in
line
a second. But
with a
just
decent
last
slope.
month, just how dry it was in lower Michigan, and
You look
really
at burning
in
index,
much of the Great
and
Lakes
it
and upper
peaks out
Midwest.
when
And then
we get
looking
these
back to the last 60 days, it was
wind
a little bit
events,
wetter when you went
maybe
back
with like
to
some dry RHs.
August. So it's not
And here's
quite
where
as
your
dry
spread
when you look toward
component might give you
Minnesota,
a clue
Wisconsin,
that you really
Michigan.
need to pay
Still
attention.
relatively dry, but
The
also
spread
dry from the Ohio
component
Valley into the northeast.
doesn't
You can
include
see
any
those really
1,000-hour fuels, so it's
dry
just
months
your
starting to show up
faster
there that we had over the
fuels,
summer,
your 1 hours, 10
especially New
hours,
Hampshire, setting their
100 hours.
driest
So
month
this,
ever
and your wind.
since
So this
records
gives you
began
an
in
idea of kind of
1895.
how that
So this
sorts of
morning's satellite
spread
loop kind of just
might
showing
work.
this banding
So
precipitation
those are
that we
just
have along the
some
cold front
things
that's moving
to
through.
look at.
One going from northern Illinois into central lower Michigan, then along the Ohio River as well. And those are going to kind of keep forming as they go up and into the
hold this all
northeast
together. This is
today,
OXBO, so
and
in
just kind of showing that again.
Massachusetts,
The
this is
radar, you can really see
2024.
that. These
This
banding
is
features.
what
You get heavier showers,
was
isolated
going on in
thunderstorms
southern
within
New
those
England
bands,
last
but in
year.
between them, not much at
Especially
all,
in
and that's going
October
to be continuing as
through
it heads up
November,
into the
beginning of
northeast.
November.
So looking
And
at
this
today,
is that rebounding that we had, even though they were really in it for like the whole period. These times when
looking at the hot dry
it
wind
went
that's here in
down,
the
then
upper
there was
left.
less fire
It was dry
activity,
and
but
breezy
then it
yesterday. Those
just quickly
southwest winds
rebounded.
up into the northeast.
And then this
a
rebounding,
little bit, more
we
today
didn't
out
get
ahead
any
of it. The
relief,
winds will be
really.
breezy.
It kept
RH
getting
won't be
higher
quite
and
as low,
higher
probably staying above
until
30,
like
35% or
November
so, instead of seeing some of the
17th,
isolated 20s we
18th,
saw yesterday.
sometime in there. And then we
So
finally got
that's
the
going to be there. You can kind
rebounding
of see that in the upper right
to
with the
decrease.
RH
And that's
there.
when we
And
finally
then
had
we
enough
do get the rain kind of
storm
coming
systems
in,
come through
and that's going to be kind of
to
the more
get them
banded,
out of the situation.
like I said. So you look at this
so these are
rainfall,
just
and
some
looks
things
really,
that
really
we
good.
can look at and how
Overall,
to
getting
interpret
like on
them,
average a half inch to an
so
inch,
that we
but
can
it's
see
not going to be like
whether
that. Some
our
areas will get an
environment
inch,
is
some will
increasing,
get a quarter,
decreasing
and some will
in
see very little. I think
susceptibility,
most areas will get some
if our
light rainfall,
conditions are
but
potentially
it's not going to be
improving, or if
widespread
we
like we'd
need
like to
to
see.
be paying
It
more
still is
attention.
convective. And then the significant
But
fire potential here in the lower right,
with
kind of keeping
changing of
that
the
just kind of a
seasons,
lower risk, just for the,
the way
some,
that
maybe some
the
more IA there in the
moisture's coming
northeast,
through, the
ahead
way
of the
that
front
the
of those
winds are
dry,
coming
breezy
through, and
conditions.
weather patterns are coming
And then
through,
looking at, Minnesota, where
it's
northwest Minnesota
becoming a
continues
very
to be dry. And if you look in
localized
the RH,
system.
it's starting to get those,
And
the winds won't be as strong as
if you
what we
need
saw
help on a more local
on
level,
Sunday. Behind the
then
front,
let me
still some
know.
dry and breezy northwest winds,
I'm
maybe
trying to
around
get some
10 to 15
folks
miles an
too
hour.
that are
And RH will
just
start to
kind
drop,
of on
get
call,
mostly
stand
around
by,
30,
some other
35%,
analysts
but there will
that
be
have
some
helped
20s mixed in
before,
there
to
as well.
just
Heading down to
see
Wisconsin.
if we can help
As we go
folks
towards
out.
tomorrow,
Sometimes it's just a matter of
really not
interpretation
much. I don't want to show
and
the hot dry wind
helping you
because it
look at an
doesn't show
area.
anything. So
So
I'm just show the temperatures tomorrow. It's
just
still
let us know
relatively
if you
cool
need any
behind the
help.
front. From much
Thanks.
of the upper Mississippi Valley, Great Lakes into the northeast behind the front.
Thanks, Cheryl. Really
And then turning
appreciate that
drier with the
demonstration.
northwest winds behind
Any
it.
questions for
But
Cheryl
the
while we have
driest
her?
and lowest RH should probably be continuing from the mid Mississippi Valley up into Minnesota. RH could be a little bit lower today, but the winds overall will be lighter, and they start to try to switch out of the south. In the northeast, RH doesn't look that bad because we'll have the rain from yesterday alleviating the conditions somewhat, but still, we'll have those dry, winds on the backside maybe start to dry things out a bit. You can see the front on the backside kind of moving out there. For significant fire potential, just kind of watching northwest Minnesota, and then kind of started adding it. In a lot of these areas, it's going to be more reflective of where they didn't get much rain than areas that got rain, that they'll give them another couple of days than what we're showing here for tomorrow. And then as we head into Thursday, it still looks fairly dry. The RH may be coming up a little bit in that southerly flow, but it's not the most moist southerly flow, so probably keep the low fire potential out there. This area of rainfall that are coming in, really not seeing it anymore. That was, I kind of looked at it today, and they're showing a little bit, but it's very, very isolated showers, and it's probably going to be to the west of that. I'm not really seeing it, but in the northeast, especially up in New England, southern Maine, dry and breezy northwest winds behind it. Given the rainfall that's anticipated, not expecting anything except really drying at this point, drying back out after the rainfall. But, if, we don't get as much rainfall, or some of these areas get missed, they could be of more concern, and I'll have a better handle on that tomorrow. But that's kind of what we're looking at least for Thursday. And just looking at the 7-day precipitation and just kind of going, this is the 2-day total, the 3-day, the 5-day, and this lower right one I was supposed to put in the 7-day, but I missed it. I put in the 5-day again. But overall, what we're seeing here is, this rainfall that we get today and tonight is pretty much going to be it. There could be something coming up in Minnesota, but I think that's more towards the middle of next week if it does happen. Kind of showing some light rainfall, but just compared to what I saw yesterday, the Weather Prediction Center is backing off, and that's what I see too. And then I put an area like these question marks in the Mid-Atlantic. Yesterday, they were showing a good coastal storm there. One of the models is still showing it, but most have really backed off and kind of kept to the south, although it could still form. It looks like some areas where, it could bring rainfall all the way up into New England. I feel really confident that New England is going to stay dry for the most part, and maybe right along the coast, they could see something. But I think if we get any heavier rain, it'll be in the Mid-Atlantic, and there's only probably about a 30% chance of that, because it looks like the coastal storm is going to develop too far south and maybe too far offshore to do any good, to get any more significant rainfall into the Mid-Atlantic. Other thing I'll be watching here, and I don't have it shown here, is where you see this here on Saturday. We're going to see those increased southerly winds. They're going to increase more from what we see on Thursday. I think Saturday is going to be probably the worst day, I should say, for Minnesota, especially northwest Minnesota. Looking like we could see sustained 15 to 20 mile an hour winds, if not a little bit stronger, and maybe gusts 30 to 40 miles an hour with RH dropping to 20%. or so there on Saturday. So that's something that's probably going to be of greatest concern. The winds will stay up. We'll start to increase on Friday and stay up on Sunday. But Sunday, we may start seeing a little bit of precip and the RH will come up. So I'm not sure about that, but I definitely think Saturday will be of greatest concern there. And then out to the south and east of that into, Wisconsin, Michigan, where it has been drier, aside from the rainfall they got, but still was spotty, is they are going to have some winds, but not quite as strong, and to stay fairly dry. So it'll continue to stay fairly dry there. Next week, this is what I looked at. This is what CPC put out on Sunday. The temperature outlook is pretty high confidence. On the precip in the lower right, they were trending drier for, pretty much from, the Ohio Valley into the Northeast, and especially northern New England. On the latest run, yesterday, they backed off on this. And I can understand why, because there is quite a bit of uncertainty showing up in the models here. But it really depends. There is going to be some sort of the ridge that's been kind of present overall in the plains. It depends on how that's going to evolve. Some models have it, pushing a little bit farther west, maybe toward the Continental Divide, which overall would be good for the Northeast. Maybe not so much for Minnesota. So like some of these areas that are shown above normal here are not. Some areas are going to be drier. So it's just something to kind of watch there. But what it really wanted to show is, like, if I go ahead, and this is like the tale of two models here, and this is 5-day precipitation looking out through next weekend. And the issue, or actually through late next week, is, up here in the upper left, this is the GFS, showing quite a bit of rainfall coming to Minnesota, Wisconsin, upper Michigan, but most of lower Michigan stays dry, but it's got some sort of coastal storm that develops in the Northeast, which would be really nice. I'm not so sure that's going to happen. It's the only one that's really showing that we might get some rain. I don't know if it's going to be that much, but if you look in the lower right, you have the European model, and this is just another example where the trough has ended up being a little bit farther east, and the ridging was a little bit farther east as well, maybe more to just east of the Mississippi River. If that happens, maybe Minnesota gets some rainfall, but maybe not as widespread. But the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic stay pretty dry in that scenario, especially in lower Michigan as well, into the Ohio Valley. So that would be a bigger concern. So there is potential that behind this storm that we see tonight and today and tonight, that we may stay dry for the next 10 to 12 days. And that will coincide with more leaf drop as well. So especially with, the rain that we get today could enhance some of the leaf drop, and again, in the winds, also on the backside in the Northeast, and just watching Minnesota the next few days. So just kind of summarize, short term, just those breezy winds in New England before the rain arrives. Like most areas, I think in the Northeast, will do well. Generally get some wetting rain, but remains vary from 1/4 inch to 1.25 inches. Central and Western Pennsylvania, I think I have a little bit more confidence that they're going to actually see that rain, maybe around 1 inch, just because of where that next band is developing right now. I think that's a pretty high confidence there that they will see more rain. But as you get farther north and east, it really depends on where those bands set up. And then the drying returns to Minnesota and the Great Lakes tomorrow and beyond, with some areas of low RH into the 20s. Longer term, just watching that dry weather returns to the Northeast, and just watching to see if we get that Mid-Atlantic coastal storm. But like I said, that's only probably about 30% chance right now. And then breezy south winds from western Minnesota through the weekend, Friday through the weekend, Saturday being the biggest concern. And that long-term uncertainty, if, that latter model, it pans out, then much of the, Michigan into the Ohio Valley and the Northeast will stay dry after this rain event for the next 10 to 12 days. End of report, pending any questions.
Thanks, Jim. Not seeing any questions. Appreciate that. We'll move right along to Cheryl Bright.